Welcome back to The Real Story. America is the world's #1 superpower. It has been for decades, and it likely will be for decades. However, that isn't stopping competing powers like China from doing everything they physically can to undermine America's position. China has long been waiting for America's demise and is doing anything it can to accelerate that process, all while positioning itself to be the world's top dog if and when that ever happens. And that brings us to our next story. China currently controls the vast majority of the world's supply of rare earths, roughly 60 to 70%. And they control about 90% of the processing of rare earths, giving them a near monopoly. And in an effort to protect this monopoly, they've announced a new plan to exert export controls on rare earths, prompting President Trump to swiftly respond, posting this statement on Truth Social, in which he discussed a plan to possibly impose 100% tariffs on all Chinese exports headed our way, and effective November 1st. Unsurprisingly, markets felt the shockwave immediately after, with the S&P 500 plunging over 2% in its worst drop since April. And it even sent some investors scrambling to safe havens like gold and treasuries, while the US dollar dipped. But then things quickly turned around after President Trump said things with China will be fine in another Truth Social post on Sunday, in which he said this: "Don't worry about China, it will all be fine. Highly respected President Xi just had a bad moment. He doesn't want depression for his country, and neither do I. The USA wants to help China, not hurt it. President DJT." Now, in light of this very interesting statement, one can't help but wonder what'll happen next. Now, here with their thoughts is Autry Pruitt, a former Trump campaign surrogate and chairman of the New Journey PAC, and Tom Norton, a candidate for Michigan State Senate and chairman of America PAC. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on board.
Absolutely. Autry, I'd like to start with you today. So clearly, we're in this weird dance with China right now where on one hand, we play nice and act as if we're friends with them and we can cooperate, but at the same time, we're all fully aware of the fact that America is the top dog on the world stage and China wants to be the top dog on the world stage. And they would do anything they can to undermine this country. So what do you make of this underlying question about whether or not the US and China are headed for a trade war?
The U.S. and China, I'm not sure if they're headed for a trade war per se. What they are headed towards is a rare mineral war. The solution is very, very simple. I do business overseas in a lot of these countries, and China is there. They're paying cash for rare minerals. They're paying cash for the mines, and they prioritize their domestic achievement over whatever ethics or ethos that may or may not exist out there in the ether. So China is on the ground paying cash for rare earth minerals just by the time the American bureaucracy votes, yes, we can do something. So the real solution is for us to be in some of these countries in Latin America, to be on the continent of Africa, and actually begin getting our own rare earth minerals. Stop relying on China. We need to get our own and do what the Chinese do, take down the rules, take down the barriers, pay these people cash, and get our antimony, get our graphite, get what we need to be a military and to remain a military powerhouse.
That's really interesting. Then to follow up, there's another question here about how we got to this place where China has a near monopoly on the processing matter of rare earths and why they have so much control over rare earths to begin with.
Yeah, the reason why is because of that. So the way it works for your audience that doesn't understand is that they have mines all over the world. There are mines for antimony, for example, all over the world. And individuals who own those mines, once it comes out of the ground, and it can come in two forms, sort of a raw form and a complete form. But once it comes out of the ground, China is right there paying cash. That's why they have a monopoly, because China goes to the government, goes to the leaders and says, hey, we want exclusive use of your mines. And guess what? We're going to provide your people with food. We're going to provide you with ships. We're going to provide you with planes. And we're going to provide you with cold, hard cash that you can bank. And the United States doesn't compete in that field because we have so many rules, so many barriers, so many obstacles trying to hold a moral high ground.
I see. That's really interesting, and that's what I wanted to know. Then moving to you, Tom, as well. I want to talk about the national security element of the situation, because the resources we're talking about are critical for U.S. industry, but also for U.S. defense. So how important is it for our national security to get involved in what Autry is talking about doing?
It's actually extremely important. We have to make sure that we're maintaining ourselves so we have independent infrastructure. You look at Michigan, we have a lot of natural resources in the UP that used to be mined for hundreds of years, and government regulations shut down those industries. We used to have factories that manufactured and refined our own rare earth minerals, and those are the types of things we need to build back up by getting state and federal regulations reduced and completely out of the way. On top of expanding out, as Autry's talking about globally, in order for us to maintain these natural resources, we also have to set a footing here in the United States where we focus on trade schools so folks know how to work in factories, build products in factories, stop focusing on colleges, because I hate to say it, not every kid needs a college degree. And some of these things that we're handing degrees out for are absolutely useless. So if we focus on these independent resources and being an internal manufacturer of our own resources, redeveloping ourselves in exploration in our own mountains out west, reinvesting, like even here in Michigan, we are a very mineral rich state. People don't realize that. And modern technology allows us not to contaminate the water like we would have, 50, 60, 70 years ago. So being able to do things like that, both domestically and abroad, as Autry's talking about, and then also making sure that we have that manufacturing built back in and be the backbone of the global industry, because the only way that we can be the arsenal of freedom globally is for the United States to have the strongest possible footing to scare the living crap out of our enemies.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what President Trump is trying to do with tariffs. It's a signal to the whole world, China included, that we are serious about protecting U.S. economic interests. And that brings us to another point here about the tariffs, Tom, for a moment. What do you make of President Trump's tariff strategy?
I think that everything is about negotiation. You come in with really high tariffs, things that sound extreme, you make them come to the negotiating table. And if they refuse to come to the table, enforce those things. You can't negotiate with somebody who refuses to sit down. What Donald J. Trump has done has been able to get everybody to sit down at the table. And we need those type of things in our state legislatures, which is why I'm running for state senate, and all across the board at every level. And we need to make sure we have a deeper bench of people who can negotiate like Donald Trump. And these tariffs are extremely important to revitalize the U.S. middle class and the U.S. economy.
Now, coming back to you, Autry, for a moment, I want to challenge myself, actually, just for a quick second and ask you, do you think we should be thinking of China as an adversary, or should we look at them as a possible business partner and maybe even an ally?
I think you look at them as a colleague you want to do business with, but you don't necessarily trust. Tom himself is a business owner, has owned a business for many years. And oftentimes in businesses, sometimes you have that vendor, that person, you need to do business with them, but you don't quite trust them. What is that Reagan said, trust but verify? That's what we need. That's the approach we need to take to China.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, coming back to you, because he brought it up as well. So looking at these tariffs, looking at President Trump's whole approach to countering China, in terms of national security, what kind of threat do they pose realistically? Because I see them as our #1 geopolitical rival on the world stage, and I want to tap on your unique insight as a veteran to answer that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at China, they're building up a very large Navy, but a lot of their equipment is copycat of the United States still. Technologically, they're still way behind. The United States still has one of the biggest arsenals with one key factor, aircraft carriers. We have over 20 of these things. You could take all the aircraft carriers in the world, allies combined, put them together. They still don't match the power of the United States Navy.
Wow.
And China cannot be a true superpower until they're able to do that. I mean, all of this stuff is things that they've copied, and it's still really old Soviet. Look at how well Russia's doing in Ukraine with a lot of this old Soviet technology. And I mean, China's upgraded a little bit, but we have found out over the last few months that they've been shipping equipment to Ukraine, and it's still getting annihilated by old Western equipment. I mean, the stuff we sent Ukraine was not the newest, was not the fanciest, and it's just tearing apart their equipment. So militarily, they are a power because of the sheer population size, not because of the military they put together. But economically, they have been challenging us, and that's why we have to redevelop that middle class to maintain this foreign power. So, I mean, essentially, you have T-72 BM tanks getting torn apart by old Leopard 2 tanks that are 25 years old. Germany's tanks are far superior to anything Russia has in the field. Their Air Force isn't holding up to basic air defense that we had developed to fight them in the 90s. They haven't redeveloped from that. They don't have the money to build the equivalent of like an Su-37 or a F-22. I mean, they've built some of these stealth aircraft. They're just not to our level. They're about 25 years behind technology-wise. And if it wasn't for their manpower, there would be nothing they could really do to threaten militarily.
Very interesting. Thank you for that insight, Tom. And gentlemen, thank you both for your time today.
Thank you, Riley.
Coming up next, we have a very, very special edition of Real Good News that's all about one of the most famous explorers in human history. More details about it after the break.